Approaching 10 to the hour. If you're just joining us, let us tell you that climate change protesters have been left fuming this morning at the Prime Minister's reported moves to roll back on his net zero commitments.
Wildlife presenter and environmentalist Chris Packham is so disappointed with the government's failure to implement climate policies that he is now considering breaking the law himself and risking prison in the name of saving the planet, something he explores in a Channel 4 documentary airing tonight.
For years, I've been marching, I've been writing banners, I've been posting posters, I've been a peaceful democratic activist, but none of it has worked. Or perhaps I have to take another route. Does that other route mean that this is the time for me to break the law?
And Chris joins us now.
Well, can we just quote to you what you say at the very end of the documentary? Because this summarises really what your journey of discovery takes you on. You say, "It's time for me to make up my own mind and decide if I should break the law. For me, myself, I'm not asking for anyone to break the law. So long as no one's hurt, I give my support to people who break the law for climate change. I have to raise my voice. I have reached a point where I now consider it ethically the reasonable thing to do." Now, for Chris Packham, mainstream environmentalist, mainstream television presenter in our living rooms most Sundays, if he says that law-breaking in this context is ethical and you support it, that is a big step. That's going out on Channel 4 tonight, not some obscure YouTube channel. That's going out on Channel 4. Are you sure you've done the right thing?
Well, look, has Rishi Sunak done the right thing today? We're reining in on our net zero commitments. The UK should be a world leader. We have the capability to see opportunities when it comes to addressing climate breakdown, not just problems. Investment in those sorts of industries. We're heading in completely the wrong direction. At this point, it's critical, therefore, that climate protesters have their voice heard. And what we've seen, and we see in our documentary, is that we have been raising that voice legitimately and democratically and peacefully, but it's not being heard. So let's be very clear. What our documentary says is there's no incitement from us to break the law, but there are very clear predictions that is what is likely to happen.
But some of you have been breaking the law. There are environmental protesters who are doing time in prison as we speak for all sorts of law breaking. You're saying we should take it a step further. I mean, one of the people that you interview in the programme, it's a fascinating interview, it's a fascinating programme, I have to say, is a guy who's written a book basically about how to blow up an oil pipeline.
Well,
and you do not condemn him.
Yeah. No, I would say it's not instructive. It's not how... It's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. It's not giving you those instructions. It's asking you to think about whether that type of protest is justified.
And you think it is?
And I think that we've reached a point where we have to, as individuals, make conscious decisions about where we think the law sits and the ethics of this situation sit. Now, you already mentioned some people have already made their mind up and they think it is right for them to break the law. And they have done, not by blowing up pipelines, but by simply sitting in the street, holding a banner or carrying a T-shirt. And we find ourselves at this point where a 68-year-old former social worker is going to be tried in this country for contempt of court, for sitting outside of that court and sticking up for the right of a fair jury in a court situation, asking people on that jury to acquit using their conscience. A fundamental pillar of the UK's democracy is under threat. So I have to ask, are the laws that we have fit for purpose? And at which point do those laws which are no longer fit for purpose, therefore, are they no longer valid?
Chris, I don't want to take issue at this stage of the interview with the climate science, but I do want to take issue with some of the methods that you do appear to endorse in the programme. Now, you say it's not about incitement and that this book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, you know, you laugh about it and say it's not literally about how to blow up a pipeline. I looked it up on Amazon, OK, and it says, in presumably notes that are endorsed by the publisher, in this manifesto, the author argues to force fossil fuel extraction to stop with our actions, with our bodies, and by defusing and destroying its tools, the tools of the industry. We need, in short, to start blowing up some oil pipelines. Now, there'll be, most of your viewers will be intelligent enough to think that would be an incredibly dangerous as well as illegal thing to do. But won't there be viewers who go, there we go, Chris Packham's told me to go out and blow up a pipeline? with all the consequences that that would entail?
I think that those people who are likely to be in thinking about violence towards property, the infrastructure of the oil and gas industry, they've already reached that point. That's the chilling underlying fact of our documentary. We meet people who are already telling us that that's probably on the agenda. Indeed, a Tory...
But you'll be talking to people on your programme tonight who are open, who haven't made their minds up. And because it's you, Chris... And I'm not trying to inflate your ego, but because it's... No, but because it's you...
I understand
Chris
entirely
Packham,
your
respected and respectable environmentalist and broadcaster, because it's you that's endorsing it and saying, I don't condemn you if you do this, it might sway them to do something which could end up killing somebody.
The whole point is that at the moment, 10,000 people have been washed away in Libya. I don't need to give you the figures. You've watched and on your programme showed people the world's being flooded, it's on fire. You know, millions of people's lives are at risk, and yet we still have politicians, as of this morning, making entirely the wrong decisions. Now, whilst we have the capacity to protest peacefully, that's what we should be doing. I continue to protest peacefully. I will use my imagination, my creativity to come up with peaceful, democratic means to protest. But what the documentary says, that if we are not listened to, there will be those who will have to have their voice heard, and they'll make a louder noise.
But what gives you the right to make that call? For example, there will be those who will draw the parallel between what you're saying and what one of the political elements of the wing of the IRA or of ISIS would say to justify violence in support of the cause. They believed in it passionately, with all of their heart and soul, and were prepared to risk an army bullet for the sake of the cause. It was their choice to break the law, and they had to take the consequences. What gives you the right to say that you have the overview that gives the authority to say, you can do this, you have my support, break the law?
I have no right and no overview, and nor do I profess to have it. I merely ask the question, is this the right time for us to break the law? Now, as you've already pointed out, climate protesters are already breaking the law. We've changed the law so rapidly in this country to impact upon protest. You can't even stand in the street with a T-shirt on without being dragged away. Now, is that the country that you want to live in? Is that the degrees of freedom that we want taken away from us? Well, at the core of our democracy is our human right to protest, and that human right is being eroded at a critical time in our species' history. If we do not exercise that right to use our voices to change policies to protect us and our future, that of our children and everything living on this planet, then I feel that we're not doing our duty. Our duty at this point is for all of us to ask the question, where do we see the law and where do we see the ethics of that law? And if those laws are no longer just because they're not protecting us, that's the fundamental reason for law, of course. We subjugate ourselves, we give up some of our freedoms for laws, and in return, a stable state, a lack of anarchy, a stable state should provide us with the basic resources, health, food, education and so forth. But if those stable resources are taken away by climate breakdown, then we have to question whether those laws are fit for purpose.
But does it justify eco-terrorism?
Eco-terrorism is, you know, some of the right-wing newspapers accuse me of being an eco-terrorist for wandering down the street with a banner.
Yeah, but blowing up a pipeline is eco-terrorism.
We haven't advocated blowing up pipelines here. We've asked the question. We've asked the question of the author of that book, what does he think? We've asked lots of other people who say that's the wrong thing to do. The only way to see this type of protest through successfully is to do no damage.
Chris, this is a personalised documentary. Yes, you've spoken to witnesses on both sides of the argument, but you present it in a very personal way, and you don't condemn that kind of action.
I go on a journey where I listen to the people who are involved in this protest. I'm critical of a lot of the protests because I would argue they're not working. They're not working because Rishi is reining back on net zero today. You could quite justifiably sit there and say you and all of the other climate protesters have failed up until this point. But if we've failed up until this point, my question in this documentary is what do we do next? And does it mean that some people, not incited by us, but some people will see the next step as violence against property of the oil and gas industry, hence blowing up.
And you say that you don't condemn that, provided nobody gets hurt in the process in support of the cause. But you can't guarantee that. The reason that we have laws, for example, about controlling explosives is because they're damn dangerous. And amateurs messing around with explosives can cause accidents. They can set a bomb, they can set a fuse, a mine. make a warning phone call, but it goes off before the phone call gets through. That's why we have laws to stop people fiddling with explosives.
Indeed, we do. But we also have governments all over the world playing with the singularly most explosive issue of our species' history. They're trashing our climate. They're trashing our biodiversity.
So two wrongs
and
make
if
a
we
right.
do not rein that in, billions of people will die.
So two wrongs
of course,
make a right.
two wrongs don't make a right. We're doing everything we can to act peacefully at the moment, everything that we can to ask them to change their mind before those billions of people's lives are imperiled. But all I'm saying in this documentary is that if they don't listen, and indeed a Tory peer in our programme says the greatest danger is our government not listening to peaceful protest because it will escalate. So we are predicting that that would happen, not inciting it. And one last thing, I think it's fair to say that everyone watching this can get on their high horse, but we all break the law. I mean, frankly, sometimes we go over 50 and a 50, over 70 on the motorway. People break the law because they make decisions that ethically they think that that's the right thing to do.
In a sentence, you may well be accused in tomorrow morning's newspapers and on radio talking shows and the rest of it. When this show goes out, and Channel 4 have kept the clips very close to their chest. We would love to have shown our viewers some of the things you say on the programme tonight. They won't let us show. It's going out tonight on Channel 4, then it'll be debated. I would predict you'll be accused of incitement to violence. What would you say to that charge?
I've not incited anyone to violence. I have no intention at this point of committing any violence myself. I'm not therefore leading by any form of example, but it is my duty, in order to protect this planet at this critical time, to ask people to think very critically about their role in protecting it.
Yeah, but you said in the documentary that you wouldn't do any of this stuff, not because you're against it in principle, because you personally don't think you'd do very well in jail.
I wouldn't do very well in jail, but that doesn't mean that I can't. Therefore, look. In order to affect a process, you need a portfolio of different techniques. You're not going to win it by just blowing up pipelines, if that happens. You're not going to win it clearly by just blocking the streets of London. You could make a great case that that isn't making any difference. Just Stop Oil have taken to the streets. At least they've given me opportunity to come onto your programme and say that Just Stop Oil are on the streets because they want a just transition away from oil and gas and towards renewable energies. Their methods are maybe confrontational, but can I ask, think about the motives. What actually makes anyone want to take part in any of these types of protests? Invariably, as you see in our documentary, it's because they're terrified. A young woman standing on a gantry over M25 in tears, saying, "Why am I here? Why do I have to be here?" And it's because she cannot imagine a future for herself. She cannot imagine having a family. She cannot imagine bringing children into the world because she has no vision of security for their future.
Chris Packham, thank you very much indeed. The programme is on 9 o'clock, Channel 4. And we're going to talk to the Home Secretary at 8:30, partly about what you've been suggesting may happen as a result of what the government...
Well, and ask him to listen to the protesters before we need to escalate the protest.
Well, many people watching this have been filling in your support, as we were saying earlier, are drawing parallels with the suffragettes. Without the suffragettes, women wouldn't have the vote. Without the ANC in South Africa, you wouldn't have democracy in South Africa. So it's a very tangled argument, but fascinating to talk to you about it, to get a little preview of tonight. I shall be watching.
Okay. I'll tell you someone else who'll be watching. That's Laura.
Yeah.
That warm feeling inside. Box Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on Good Morning Britain.